Well, this is just incredible. Children poisoned by lead and rats the size of cats. It's a new internal report that details a, quote, emergency in New York City's public housing. Last June, the federal government sued the city's housing authority, citing a failure to provide safe, sanitary homes for public housing residents, and they reached a settlement. In it, the city was required to spend more than $2 billion over the next decade to improve conditions. And a monitor was appointed to oversee operations. But that housing monitor says the city has failed to clean up, and more children are being found with high levels of lead in their blood. The failures are detailed in an article by Gregg Smith, a reporter for the city. Gregg joins me now on set. So, Gregg, New York City appointed Bart Schwartz back in February. It's been a few months now that he's put together this report. What are really the major issues that he's already uncovered?
Well, I mean, the most important aspect of this is that the Housing Authority was warned. They've had the U.S. Attorney, they've had Ben Carson, the HUD Secretary, and they've had the Mayor of New York, and everyone pointing a finger at them and saying, get your act together. And so here we have the monitor, who is specifically brought in to make sure that they do that, is saying specifically that they are failing on a number of very specific apartment illnesses. The most significant one that I see is the issue of lead paint. You referenced lead.
Why is that so hard, Gregg, to get that under control?
Well, there's 175,000 apartments in the New York City Housing Authority. It's huge. And it's the biggest landlord in New York. And most of these buildings are at least 50 years old. And most of these buildings were built when lead paint was used routinely. Lead paint was outlawed in New York City in 1960, and then ultimately in the United States in 1978. But there's still a lot of lead paint in these buildings, as there is in buildings all over the city. And what is the issue is that this is a public housing authority. This is the government. And so they have been made aware of this problem for many, many, many years. There are all these rules and regulations and specifically laws that tell them you have to inspect and clean it up. And they have been failing to do that. And this report by the monitor says that they are still failing to do that, even though they've been red flagged on this issue for the last 5 years.
Not only are they failing, the housing monitor says this is just business as usual for them. It's sort of troubling. But the housing authority's general manager says, and I'm quoting here, challenges are deep rooted and changes will not happen overnight. What's it going to take, Gregg, for these changes to be enacted?
Well, the monitor is, this is the first time that you have someone who is independent, who is coming in to stay on top of the situation. People come and go. There has been no chairperson of the New York City Housing Authority
This
since
is the very
April.
first time?
No. There's been no chairperson of the New York City Housing Authority since April of 2018. So there's been really nobody in charge. This is the first time that you have a monitor, a federal monitor, who is the job is to stay there. Don't just look at it once and then walk out the door. So what he's doing is he's specifically saying, here's what you got to deal with, and I'm not going away.
Rats in New York City is something that we've known for decades, right? But explain to me, why is this so horrific for these people in public housing?
So let me just tell you the specifics of a very of development up in East Harlem called Washington Houses. So the monitor pointed this out and included this wonderful letter here, which is from the tenants. 400 tenants in this development signed this letter and sent it off to the housing authority. What they said was there were so many rats in this development that the workers refused to go into the basement. And therefore they turned off the trash compactors. But tenants continued to put trash in the chutes, right? And so what happens to the trash when the compactor doesn't work? Up it goes. It just stacks and stacks and stacks up to the 14th floor. And the rats would go into the chutes and climb their way to the top and work their way down. And sometimes the people would, one of the tenants we spoke with said she opened up the, she opened up the chute to throw out her trash, and a rat jumped out.
Oh, geez.
So these are conditions that nobody should have to deal with.
And often it is the poor and people who aren't economically able to move up that
almost always
get affected by this.
That's correct.
So, Gregg, what do you think, based on your reporting, your research, what's it going to take for the city to fix this and for these people to have some sort of a change here?
Well, I mean, the fact that there's a monitor in place,
Yeah.
I think, is a good thing. I'm a very skeptical person. You know, I'll believe it when I see it. I've been writing about this for 6 years, and the problem is that it's huge. This place has a gigantic bureaucracy,
Yeah.
and moving any bureaucracy that size is very difficult. But if you have somebody who's always going back and knocking on the door and saying, "What are you doing about this?" I think that's a big step. But we'll see. I mean, my take is that this is a report that points out problems. Now we need to see what they do about it.
Well, you shed a light on a very important problem that most people were unaware of. Thank you very much, Gregg, for joining us in this report.
Happy to do it.
Yeah.